We're going to create machines smarter than us. We're going to create molecular machines so that we can basically 3D print any form of matter we want. And we're going to abolish involuntary death and cure aging. It seems very clear the super AI will understand things about physics and mind and the universe in general that we don't understand. While Cardano is way, way better than Ethereum.
I've talked about AI obviously with everybody here collectively nonstop for the last few days. So I kind of wanted to jump into some fun questions that I think you'll be able to answer a lot more in depth than a few of the other interviewees. But the first one is simply, with all the advancements in AGI and just approaching superintelligence, what are the possibilities that this actually turns into a variable of us living in a simulation?
Are you asking whether we live in a simulation now or whether we will upload ourselves into a simulation after the Singularity?
Exactly.
I mean, either one is possible, of course. So.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, that was, you said something on stage that was just in reference to we don't necessarily know, obviously, which way this is going to head.
In the vein of intellectual humor, right? So Nick Bostrom, who was a longtime transhumanist, I worked together with him in the World Transhumanist Organization for a while, and he worked closely with Anders Sandberg, who at the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University now, and Anders gave a keynote here. But Nick wrote an influential paper on the simulation hypothesis, the idea that we all live in a simulation. And he didn't invent that idea by any means. It's been around a long time in science fiction, and then before that in other forms. But he crystallized an amusing argument in favor of the idea that we live in a simulation now. Basically, his argument was the universe has been around for 14 billion years, and during that time, probably a lot of other intelligent civilizations have come up, like the odds that we're the first one a priori seem fairly low. But once an intelligent civilization comes up, odds are it will experience a technological singularity, build a huge amount of computers, and then start living in a simulation that it's built. So therefore, if the odds are high that we're not the first species, and after each species becomes intelligent, it creates a simulation world, the odds are high that we actually live in one of the simulation worlds built by one of the other intelligent species that came about. But to me, the punchline of that is, if indeed we're living in a simulation world, then the story that the universe was created 14 billion years ago is bullshit, and it's just fake data in the simulation anyway. So the conclusion of the whole argument is we have no idea what the hell is the world that we're living in, right?
It kind of like made me think, like, if that answer ends up being true, it's like this entire time we were just in one giant bad large language model that was just feeding misinformation.
Or it could be like a video game written by an alien third grade student for a class assignment, and probably they got a C- for the low quality of the creatures they created, right?
Or so, we're a sixth grade experiment.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is, all these metaphors of a science experiment or a language model, they're almost surely wrong, but the conclusion that we don't have a solid knowledge of sort of what this universe and reality is, and as we upgrade our intelligence, we're likely to get a wholly different view of the foundations of our own universe, and perhaps discover dimensions of reality that we can't conceive. Now that seems kind of clear if you just look at human history, right? Like every 50, 100, 200 years, we've overturned our understandings of physics, and we've discovered whole new dimensions of reality we didn't know about before, like discovering that there's actually hundreds of billions of galaxies and hundreds of billions of stars per galaxy, right? Rather than these being angels flying around up in the sky. The discovery of the quantum micro world and so on. So, I mean, we have quite a track record of overturning our understanding of life, the universe, and everything, and discovering new aspects of reality. And that's without even upgrading our brains, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's assuming that the universe as we understand it now is the final story seems to make no sense. And this ties in with some issues regarding AI safety and the future of AI. So there was a fairly interesting paper by Max Tegmark and Stephen Omohundro published a couple months ago, I guess, about provably safe AI. So their idea was an interesting one, and I did an interview with Stephen Omohundro about this a couple weeks ago, and he also gave a talk as part of the online portion of the BGI event. But their basic idea is if all the software running everything in the world and all the hardware on which that software runs is written in a way where it can be mathematically proved by an automated theorem prover, where it can be mathematically proved that the software will do what it was specified to do. And if you then prove that the formal theorem prover is working correctly, and then you have a committee of a few thousand experts verify that the verifier, the theorem prover, is working, right? Then you have a world economy where access to resources like compute time and raw materials from the ground and robots for building stuff is gated by this formally verified infrastructure. So even if you have some rogue bunch of terrorists or some AI that goes berserk, it can't break the security of the global infrastructure because you've proved that it's secure, right? And in a way, I like this direction. One of the things that attracted me to Cardano blockchain originally was they formally verified their Ouroboros consensus algorithm. Like they used a mathematical theorem prover to prove that it would do what it was supposed to do in terms of decentralized secure consensus. And in general, the Plutus smart contract language from Cardano is it's feasible to formally verify. I mean, as is the meta language we're using in our hypercycle blockchain, but Solidity is more like C++ or something. Like in practice, you're not going to formally verify Solidity programs. But the thing is, if you look at Tegmark and Omohundro's idea, what does it mean to formally verify that computer hardware will always do what's specified? Well, that assumes we know how physics works, right? Because, I mean, these are semiconductors, they're quantum mechanical devices, and if you got an AGI that understood some aspect of quantum mechanics that we don't understand, then it may well find a way to tunnel around the formal proofs that we've made, because these guarantees, at their best, would be based on physics as we now understand it. Of course, physics as we now understand it is not even a complete self-consistent theory, right? Like we don't have a unification of gravitational theory with the standard model of particle physics. So we actually know our physics must be wrong. So then will a super AI discover new physics in some way that lets it hack around how we think our chips can be used? Well, again, we don't know. I mean, this isn't even the biggest problem with their formal verifiability idea. I mean, I think there's a practical issue, which is like getting the world's manufacturers to...
That was going to be the question, because we're reliant on, obviously, very centralized entities, and even a lot of tensions in Taiwan with China, and they're a large producer of that.
Even if you set aside the political issues, because I think the Chinese government would be very happy with formally verified infrastructure. I mean, they like things that are under control, right? But I think it would cost well more than Sam Altman's $7 trillion to replace global infrastructure with things that are rigorously, formally verifiable, right? But the reason I raise this now is, the fact that we don't know whether we live in a simulation and we don't have a consistent model of physics. I mean, all this adds, an additional element of uncertainty to what will happen with super AI post-Singularity, because it seems very clear the super AI will understand things about physics and mind and the universe in general that we don't understand, making it even more ridiculous to think we're going to be able to understand and constrain and chart out exactly what
Are you worried about that to have an overall effect on just depression? I mean, we're talking about if we do approach artificial superintelligence, that is going to break and disrupt what, 95% of the world's population that's religious?
Well, I think that religions have proved very adept at adapting to new realities, actually. I mean, if you look at, I mean, I'm not religious and I wasn't raised religious, but I mean, I've read the Bible and the Quran and the works of Baha'u'llah and the Vedas and all this stuff. And if you look at what's literally written in these ancient holy books, it doesn't apply to modern society too well in very many particulars, right? So it's been very liberally interpreted over the millennia, right? And religions have determinate processes for doing this, right? So I mean, if you look in Islam, you're not supposed to just read the Quran and apply it to today's life. There's all these hadiths, right, which are created by various imams over the centuries, and you're supposed to look at how these imams interpreted what the Quran really meant in the current situation. And it all makes sense in terms of its own process, sort of in the same way that, you know, the court system interprets the U.S. Constitution in a way to make it applicable to the modern world, and it's not always transparent on the face of it why they made the judgment they did, but if you follow the historical record, you can see why. So, I mean, I think religions are pretty good at adapting to realities. I mean, I think that said, the percentage of traditionally religious people on the earth is declining, and I would suspect that post-singularity, the traditional religions will become more niche, right? But I don't think that has to be sudden. I mean, I think the Pope and the leaders of Islam and the Tibetan Buddhist lamas they will all find ways to rationalize the singularity within their belief systems, right? And that's fine. And in the end, the way that traditional religions are rationalizing the singularity, may seem to make equal sense to the way any of us rationalize.
It's the second coming.
Singularity. Yeah, I mean, because from the point of view of a super AI 100 times smarter than us, all of our human belief systems, including our rational scientific approach, are probably going to seem quaint and silly in various ways, right? So I mean, just as we look at how a dog or a cat approaches the world, and I mean, there's a difference between a really smart dog and a stupid dog, and different dogs have different personalities, which are interesting to think about. But in the end, they're operating with dog-level intelligence, right? And there's certain things no dog is going to see that we can see. Yeah. I mean, a super intelligence may look at us that way. Some of these super intelligences may actually be upgraded versions of you and me, right? But still, looking back, you know, they will see the original human version that seeded them as a very, very limited sort of being. But you know, I see my 1-year-old self that way, right? Like, I mean, I remember to some extent my way of thinking when I was 1 and 2 years old, and it was not what it is now, right? I mean, but yet I still feel like it was me, because there's that continuous evolution. Like, if I go back year after year, the changes weren't that big, right? So I think
that created who you were today, essentially. Because you're on stage talking about you were 7, I believe, when you stumbled upon a book in, I don't remember if you said Massachusetts or if it was some random.
It was Jersey.
Jersey.
Yeah,
it was Jersey.
So I was born in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. Then when I was quite young, we moved to Eugene, Oregon. Okay. Which was a fun place to be in the early 70s. It's just crazy hippies, you know, selling crafts out in the street and protesting the Vietnam War and so on. It was playing folk songs on the guitar. It was an interesting environment. Yeah. Then when I was 7, my father, who was a professor at University of Oregon, he was denied tenure in the sociology department for not being Marxist enough, right? He wasn't even Marxist. He wrote a textbook of Marxist sociology, but he merely categorized Marx as the most important sociologist rather than as an ultimate and an invincible source of ultimate truth, right? So he didn't get tenure at University of Oregon. he moved to Rutgers University in New Jersey, which was a more open-minded sociology department. But then, yeah, I was plunged into typical American suburbia, which was a big shock after Eugene, which was sort of a hippie colony. On the other hand, we had a fairly nice town library in the little town in southern Jersey I was living in, and I sort of went through reading every science book in the collection in the library, which wasn't that many. So there was like 3 physics books, 2 linguistics books, blah, blah. But there was one book on what we would now call the Singularity, which was the Prometheus Project by Gerald Feinberg. And I was quite amused at this Beneficial General Intelligence Conference that Jerome Glenn, who I've known for some years, who runs the Millennium Project, and he gave a fantastic talk here just describing his survey of people in 70 countries around the world of what they think is going to happen in the future. But he had known Gerald Feinberg, who wrote this book, The Prometheus Project. They'd been part of the World Future Society in the 1970s, which was just one step away from where I was, because these guys were in the World Future Society in the 70s in DC. My father was the chair of the World Future Society chapter in Philadelphia in the same time frame. So we were just a couple cities away in the same organization of wild-eyed people thinking about the singularity and so forth. But I unfortunately didn't intersect Gerald Feinberg when I was a kid, but I read his book, and he what he said is within the next few decades, he didn't put an exact timeline, but we're going to create machines smarter than us. We're going to create molecular machines so that we can basically 3D print any form of matter we want, and we're going to abolish involuntary death and cure aging. Then the question will be, do we use this to promote rampant, self-indulgent, pointless consumerism? Or do we use this to advance human consciousness in new directions? And he wanted to put that to a democratic vote to all humans. And he wanted the UN to go around to every little village in Africa and everywhere and install a computer polling system and teach people about the radical future that was coming, and then get them to decide what direction it should go in, which I thought was a super cool idea, right? And
hard to implement, though.
Well, wouldn't be hard to implement compared to like Visa or MasterCard or things that the world, I mean, we rolled out a payment system with a little credit card scanning device in not every African village, but every 4th tier African city, right? I mean, so we are able to actually go global with fairly sophisticated technologies.
Do you plan on doing that with Jerome?
When we want to, right? And going into the cryptocurrency direction, I mean, I think blockchain networks provide a modern way to actually implement this global participatory democracy that Feinberg envisioned. I mean, he saw that you should do it with a secure global computing network, which was pretty good for 1968 when he wrote the book, right? Because I mean, their mainframe computers were not even that common then, right? I mean, AI was there. I mean, checkers had already been beat at the grandmaster level. Chess wouldn't be beat till '95. So, I mean, and you already had AI programs doing algebra and differential calculus and so on. So there, you already had deep neural networks by the '68. So there was something to go on, but still it was foresighted to see you'd want a secure global voting system. But he didn't at that point see how to decentralize the secure global voting system. He was relying on the UN to operate it, and the UN probably seemed less pathetic in 1968 than now, right? I mean, they were in the midst of helping pull off global nuclear disarmament, which did succeed, right? I mean, that was a big thing.
Yeah, I got to speak to Jerome a lot on that with what he's building. Do you plan on, I'm sure there's been conversations around it, because he essentially wants to develop a new convention for AGI because there is no groundwork or policy out there. Are you seeing that's where we're heading with an underlying infrastructure?
I think that sort of initiative is important, and just spreading awareness about the issues and getting governmental agencies and policymakers thinking about these issues is a great thing to do. I mean, it means that the network of people thinking about the singularity in a serious way is not just, transhumanist visionaries and Silicon Valley tech bros, right? I mean, it's reaching out into the governments of 70 plus countries now, hopefully expanding to more. So I think that's great. Whether the actual policies put in place are going to have a significant impact in guiding the growth of AGI, I'm a little skeptical of, but it really depends on how fast things go, right? Like if it's 30 years until human level AGI, then perhaps so, right? I mean, then perhaps the process he's doing will lead to a global collection of policies for guiding AGI to be put in place, and this will provide some meaningful framework. Right now, I mean, if we get to human level AGI within 3, 5, 10 years, my guess would be that this global policy process will emerge more slowly than the AI technology will develop, right? So
yeah, for some reason the government's always slower than the amount of tech that's being developed.
Well, this is for a few different reasons, but and this also is one of the issues we need to think about when considering how to deploy global blockchain-based governance and guidance mechanisms for AI, right? So, I mean, historically, democratic decision-making processes are just way less efficient than more autocratic decision-making processes, right? And you can see why. There's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of debate, factions form, factions merge, parties split. I mean, politics are played in various ways, and then eventually, almost miraculously now and then, some actual decision is made moving things forward. Whereas if you just have an autocrat at the top saying, well, I'll make this call, do this, I'll make this call, do this, I'll make this call, do this. I mean,
it's quicker.
Yeah, you can advance way faster. I mean, this is how Singapore has developed so rapidly, and this is how Deng Xiaoping, quietly revolutionized China, building it from a poor country in the early 80s to a global superpower. And 80% of the people on the planet to be lifted out of poverty to the middle class were in mainland China. This was courtesy of Deng Xiaoping opening up China to capitalism with Chinese characteristics.
State
right?
levels, yeah.
But that's one guy. I mean, in that case, it's not a dictatorship. It's one guy working a bureaucracy, but still there's one visionary leading it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, essentially all successful companies have been that way, right? You've got a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Rockefeller, going way back before the modern tech companies.
Yeah.
One visionary can push forward really effectively, and democratically governed processes are not commonly like that. I mean, like look at something like U.S. Democratic Party, right? There's a great opportunity there, given the demographic shifts in the U.S. and the fact that the Republican Party keeps putting forward like quasi-literate buffoons as their presidential candidates, but they're disorganized because they're democratic and quasi-decentralized, right? So
It's going to be an interesting election year this year.
Yeah.
And I got there's a question I do want to go off of that in just a second, but actually we'll start there because I want to get to Singularity.
Let me wrap up this point. I think one of the challenges I'm hoping we can meet in the Singularity Net ecosystem, quite apart from building the core technologies that we're working on in terms of the OpenCog Hyperon AGI system, and then the whole decentralized stack with Singularity Net platform and Hypercycle on NewNet, which we discussed in some previous interviews. Setting aside all that amazing technology, I mean, the other challenge that we're trying to confront is how you do decentralized decision-making in a way that is not bogged down in pointless politics, right? Because we do want decision-making about how to guide Singularity net-based AGI towards superintelligence. We want that decision making to be done by our whole community, but we also don't want to just keep tripping over ourselves and not be able to make real decisions when, the competition, which is big tech companies, has the added efficiency that comes from internal autocracy, right? So how to craft efficient ways of doing decentralized governance and guidance is a quite tricky problem. And I mean, there's a panel on that at this moment here at the BGI conference. So we're trying to move forward on that. In some ways, it's a harder problem than building the general intelligence, because general intelligence, you can engineer the thing, right? Whereas a governance process, you're more modulating the group behavior of humans, because you're not able to re-engineer the voters, right?
Yeah, that's
not yet.
That led. So that was the question, was going to be how you're approaching this through with Singularity Net, of course, because now you're actually a part of multiple. You're on Hypercycle as well. I had the opportunity to interview Tufi.
Yeah.
Awesome guy. But you mentioned Cardano at the Ouroboros, right? With the proof of kind of that proof mentality of being able to sustain an infrastructure that, I forgot the exact term that you're referring to on that within reference, but is there a plan on or a shift where you've talked with Charles Hoskinson in integrations of an infrastructure like this through Singularity? Because I know they're both different. They're both built completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future of blockchain is more and more widely acknowledged to be cross-chain rather than one blockchain that rules them all. And I mean, Hoskinson himself has gone pretty hard in that direction. Working, I mean, there was Hydra, but then there's Melkamita. There's a whole bunch of different technologies for interfacing between Cardano and other blockchains. And then in the EVM world, you have Substrate, which is giving a very nice way to connect together different EVM-based blockchains, and Substrate could be extended beyond EVM also, right? So I think doing an AI network that runs across different blockchains is a fairly natural thing in terms of how the blockchain world is evolving now. And I mean, Ethereum still has better tooling and more people on it. I mean, there's more value locked in Ethereum. There's more turnover, right? So that, I mean, there's a reason to be on Ethereum just culturally and economically, even though the underlying technology is not as solid in my view as Cardano or a load of other blockchains like Elrond. I mean, you could even like NEM, which is not even current anymore, had in many ways a more solid infrastructure, right? But Ethereum, there's a lot of people doing stuff there. Cardano has a fantastic community, and they have an amazing developer team that's developing really cool tools on top of their platform. So I think there's something valuable there in that group of people working on that cool technology. So we want to be in the Cardano world. On the other hand, as you discussed with Tufi, while Cardano is way better than Ethereum as a substrate for AI in terms of formal verification, in terms of the level of decentralization that it has in its consensus, and having an AI-friendly smart contract language in Haskell, still it doesn't do everything we wanted for an underlying blockchain layer for AI. And if you want to scale down the use of blockchain in AI so that little pieces of your AI system can communicate with each other on chain, as opposed to just putting big chunks of AI into nodes that communicate with each other on chain. Cardano is better for that than Ethereum, but we needed something more customized for AI. So I mean, Hypercycle is that basically. So Tufi and Dan Tolliver's clever insight for how to build a blockchain without a ledger. I mean, this, among other advantages, it lets you make a blockchain that can be very fast and cheap for communication between AI
Yeah.
processes running in different nodes. So I'd originally been thinking of Hypercycle as a Cardano sidechain, and it can be that, right? You can use it as a Cardano sidechain. Like if you have a process in Cardano and you want to then offload some work into an AI customized network, you can use Hypercycle as a sidechain to Cardano in that way.
Yeah.
But as we work through more of the software development for Hypercycle, we realized, I mean, you could use it in a lot of ways. So you could use it as a layer 1 blockchain. You could also use it as what Tufi calls a layer 0, which is basically just use Toda IP, which is the protocol underlying Hypercycle, as a substitute for TCP/IP, the basic network protocol. It's slower, but it's more secure with a decentralized consensus mechanism, right? So, I mean, all that is important, because once we do break through to a human level AGI, at that point, once the breakthrough happens, you can't turn around and say, okay, now we need a decentralized infrastructure for this. Because while not as hard as building the AGI, it's still years of work, right? Mm-hmm. So if you make a breakthrough to AGI, say OpenAI releases GPT-5, we release something twice as smart as GPT-5, right? If you had to then turn around and say, how will I decentralize the infrastructure? It's too hard a problem to solve, even with trillions of dollars. It's too hard a problem to solve in 6 months. These things just take some time to work through. So we're working through all that now, step by step, figuring out how to make the decentralized infrastructure for both applied AI now and AGI once a breakthrough toward AGI occurs.
Yeah, and that's a perfect lead into the whole DePIN narrative that's kind of sparked the industry heavily over the last 3 months. I think this comes pretty much after, of course, Jensen made the announcement of them breaking Moore's law, which obviously isn't physics, but is based off historical metrics. And now we're looking at 20x time I don't know if that's the computational power, the speed, or the advancements per year, which is exponential, correct, in terms of growth. So is that something that you believe is going to really be an ingredient in the next steps of AGI?
I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in the hardware space. So we're working with a company called GSI, which has a chip called the APU, which is the Associative Processing Unit. And it's totally different than GPUs, but may have a comparable effect on different kinds of AI. So that the GPU speeds up matrix multiplication, which is a particular math operation involving vectors of floating point numbers. And
they do that through accelerated computing?
Yeah. So, but they do it through parallel computing, through SIMD, single instruction, multiple data stream computing on the GPU, so NVIDIA GPU or something. So pretty much like if you have, say, 1,000 processors on your NVIDIA GPU, and you have, let's say, an image with 100,000 pixels or something, to simplify a lot, you could have each of those 1,000 processors working on 100 pixels at once. So then you're processing the whole image in parallel, right? Mm-hmm. So this is why GPUs were originally developed, was for graphics. It was to accelerate graphics rendering, for gaming, for porn, right, which has driven a lot of the early internet. Mm-hmm. So GPUs were developed to do parallel processing of images in various ways, but it turns out they're also useful for deep neural networks. So if you have a neural net with 1 billion nodes, and you have 1,000 processors on your GPU, so that then you can run 1 million of those nodes in your neural net on each processor, and then you're speeding up the whole thing, right? You're speeding up by not quite 1,000 times, but close to 1,000 times on the 1,000 processors. So, but GPUs are specialized for what are called floating point operations, right? So like the integers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The floating point numbers are all the ones in between, like 1.35222 or something, right? So if you have a vector or an image with which is described with floating point numbers. Then that's manipulated with matrix multiplication. So a transformer neural net, like the kind underlying GPT-4, or underlying, say, music gen for generating music, when you boil down the math, it all comes down to matrix multiplication, basically, which is an operation on these big vectors. And NVIDIA's GPUs speed that up. So in a certain sense, NVIDIA got really lucky because they developed this technology to speed up graphics.
Yeah.
And then they discovered, well, lo and behold, the same math underlying computer graphics underlies deep neural networks. And so then they found themselves with the hardware to fuel the deep neural net revolution, right? Which is, it's the power of mathematics, of course, that the same math operation underlies all these things. Now, when you look at what we're doing in OpenCog Hyperon, which is my own best attempt at an AGI system, or if you look at what's needed to formally verify compute code, be it AI code or be it Plutus smart contracts in Cardano, this is about discrete operations. I mean, when you boil it down in math, it's about operations on the integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not on the floating point decimal numbers in between, which is, so, you can think about it because a program is sort of a discrete thing formed of little keywords and parentheses and so on. A computer program does not consist of a bunch of continuous floating point numbers. So if we want to accelerate formal verification of computer programs or AI algorithms besides deep neural nets, like logical reasoning algorithms or evolutionary learning algorithms, which are some of the things we do in OpenCog Hyperon along with neural nets. If you want to accelerate these sorts of things, a chip like the APU by GSI is more effective than a GPU. So I mentioned that one because we're actually working with it on an experimental basis, and it exists. I mean, they've done limited production runs and are doing bigger ones, right? But there's a whole spectrum of hardware innovation. So in True AGI, which is an AI spin-off of Singularity Net, in partnership with Simuli, which is an AI hardware company run by my friend Rachel St. Clair, who's here at the BGI event also. So we've designed a chip especially for basically AI memory retrieval. For what, I mean, technically speaking, it's a chip for pattern matching on metagraphs. So you have a graph knowledge structure, like we use inside OpenCog, or it could be the graph of connectivity in a blockchain, right? And then you want to find stuff in that graph. We designed a chip specialized for that. Now this chip is still in the prototype stage, it's not in production, but my point is, it's not just scaling up NVIDIA GPUs. That's happening, it's very important, but you're going to see a whole flourishing of different specialized hardware designs coming out in the next few years. And then after that, you'll see the quantum chips come out, right?
Yeah, that was,
which is not too far off. It's a real thing now.
And it's right there with AGI, but I've worked with a company that uses on-demand correlation matrix data sets to find hidden relationships between stocks, companies, an earthquake in Taiwan, how that affects Bitcoin miners. But the issue that I've seen a lot comes down to storage. Because taking that capacity and verifying all of these data points, all of these different random variables, and putting that into rows and columns of data sets, just creates a need for an exponential amount of storage, which was going to lead me into everything that you guys are developing. If we approach AGI, is storage even at a capacity today to be able to process these things, or is that within the prototypes?
Storage is not really the bottleneck that we face. I would say for AGI, if you want to look at which aspects of modern computer architecture are the limitation, it's probably the cache RAM, actually. It's not storage. Because, I mean, this partly depends on what approach you think will work for AGI, though. So a deep neural net is heavily reliant on floating point math operations, so mostly floating point multiplications and divisions, right? Now, if you're doing the sort of AI that we're doing in the OpenCog project, or if you're trying to do formal verification of smart contracts or something, then most of your code's time is taken up looking stuff up in a large knowledge store in RAM. So the rate limiting factor is actually how fast can you execute queries against RAM, but this largely comes down to your RAM caching policies, right? So how well does the cache work to pull the stuff you're gonna need to access next out of RAM into the RAM cache, and how fast is the cache access? And that's actually more of a limiting factor than availability of storage at the moment, because storage, I mean, disk storage is very, very slow. Like that's the difference between RAM access and disk access is like the difference between looking in your memory and driving to the library to get a book out. It's like 10,000 times slower or something, right? So that, I mean, you do want that backup storage, but that's it's not the worst problem at the moment. But the amazing thing, though, is this, as your initial question alluded, there's an exponential or hyper-exponential speed up in the hardware that we have at our disposal for AI, at the same time as we have an exponential speed up in the availability of data to train the AI, and an exponential increase in the number of people who are thinking about AI and being paid to work on it, right? So we've got a lot of factors converging together, and it's a very interesting synergy with what's happening in the crypto space now.
Yeah.
So being at the intersection of AI and crypto, as Singularity Net, Hypercycle, NewNet, and so on are at the moment, right? Being at the intersection of AI and crypto, we're at, it's a very interesting point in terms of the market and the economic aspect, because the crypto markets are waking up. Looks like this will probably be a good year for crypto.
Best time to have the convention, by the way. You timed that perfectly.
Well, that was some Nostradamus level prognostication on the part of our team, because I mean we organized this event like 6 or 8 months ago, right? And
okay.
There was some lead time getting the venue and inviting people, so we were like, Bitcoin halving is coming up, right? Like probably is going to be a good time. But then the SEC's decision on the Bitcoin ETF was a sort of just random gift from the dark gods, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't predict when that was going to happen.
Oh yeah, as soon as Cointelegraph released that article that was wrong, and then it just sparked in October, and then it didn't stop. But you had also Nvidia just crushing report after report. So AI.
That's what I mean. I mean, the fact that AI will keep booming, to me, is fairly determinate. I mean, it will go up faster, then it will go up a little slower, then it will go up faster. But I don't think we're seeing another AI winter or anything. I mean, I think AI just keeps growing and growing until the singularity. Crypto will keep going up and down by the nature of it, because it is technology driven, and crypto technology keeps getting better and better, but it's also market speculation driven. And
well, how much of like the AI and DePIN sector in crypto is just over speculated, overhyped, and a lot of copy paste API?
I mean, well, certainly, there was a statement by the science fiction writer Theodore Sturgeon in the 60s or 70s. He says, people complain that 95% of science fiction is bullshit, but I mean 95% of everything people do is bullshit, right? So it certainly applies to crypto and to the intersection of AI and crypto. I mean, there's a lot of nonsense, and people are just throwing around the term AI to get money for their project, and because they know the market can't look and see what's really AI or what isn't. But I think there's an increasing number of real projects out there using blockchain infrastructure to do AI stuff. My issue with how pretty much every AI meets blockchain project, except the ones in Singularity Net ecosystem, are architected. My issue is more that they tend to build specific AI algorithms too deeply into their protocol. So if you're designing an AI network specifically around deep neural nets and matrix multiplication and training ML models and so forth, I mean, you're sort of overfitting the plumbing of what you're doing to the AI algorithm that happens to be fashionable at this moment, right? So then, suppose that 2 years from now, hybrid neural symbolic systems that use logic reasoning and deep learning together are the best approach. Then a blockchain network that is wired to training of neural models to get tokens like into its plumbing. I mean, they'll have to hard fork, they'll have to replace their core architecture. It's not an impossible thing to do, but the choice we made in Singularity Net, Hypercycle, and NuNet from the beginning is to sort of layer it more so that the core platforms are agnostic to what AI algorithm you're using. And then I do have my own ideas about what AI algorithms are interesting to build on there, but I don't think you should make your core blockchain layer dependent on that. I mean, so if you look at traditional computing, I mean, if NVIDIA had made their initial chips too much specialized for graphics rendering, then they wouldn't have been able to pivot to using their chips as the foundation for deep neural networks, right? So it's because you had some layering in the tech stack where each layer does something that makes sense by its own light, and then what's in the next layer exploits that, but the lower layer isn't hyper-specialized to the layer above. And I think most people jumping in now to do AI and blockchain together are not layering things in the way that I think you want to do to make a really broadly functional decentralized tech stack. So like, I mean, BitTensor is a cool project. I'm happy for their success because, you know, the more decentralized AI is out there, the better. But I mean, is tensor math really the end all? I mean, a tensor is a higher dimensional matrix, right? So if you want to do AI for formal verification of smart contracts, it's not about tensors. It's a different sort of math. So then, I mean, you could do it so you have one decentralized network for each algorithm or data structure. So you have like bit tensor, you have bit hypervector, you have bit lambda logic expression or something. But I mean, or you could have an AI algorithm agnostic layer,
which is hypercycle.
Singularity Net is built that way, and that's why we can put Singularity Net on Hypercycle, right? Yeah. I mean, we built Singularity Net to be agnostic to what AI algorithm you run on top of it. We also built Singularity Net to be agnostic to what blockchain you run underneath it, right? And so then we could swap out Ethereum for Cardano or Hypercycle, and we could run deep neural nets or logic engines or whatever we want on top of it. I mean, but in the end, this is just like software engineering 101, right? I mean, this is not that innovative. The thing is, in the crypto world, software engineering 101 is quite rarely adhered to because, as you allude, the standard development methodology is take someone's code, fork it, remove their name and copyright, launch it as your own thing with an anonymous handle, get people to lock their money in it, then disappear with the money. And I mean, when the default development methodology is like cut and pasting code and half the time not auditing it, right? I mean, this is it's a far cry from the way Amazon and Google are building their tech stacks, right? Yeah. So I mean, we have been trying to follow proper software design, engineering, and testing methodology, and Cardano, IOG totally has also, right? And the result of trying to do things right, software engineering wise, and even going beyond the standard and formally verifying things, the result is that you are not as fast as people who just want to copy paste fork code and roll shit out as quickly as you can. And the result is major blockchain networks that crash all the time, right? Which not to name any major blockchain networks.
I couldn't think of any off the top of my head. Yeah. Well, and that leads me to like the last part of this too, then, because you spoke about Vitalik's most recent like deceleration blog post he put out. Is Ethereum now starting to transition to understanding that the software needs like significant change to operate in the ways that AGI will need?
I mean, I thought Vitalik's blog post on the sort of DAC, decentralized or defensive accelerationism, was on the whole fairly well thought out. I mean, I don't think there was anything major in there I disagreed with, and I think his post, I guess it was last year, about decentralized social media, and it was decentralized identity. He had a very nice post on decentralized identity right after the WorldCoin release, right? I mean, I thought that was also very well thought through. So I mean, he's incisive at thinking through these issues at a high level. I think he doesn't have much awareness of all the depth of thinking that's already been done on these topics. So, I mean, I've met him and we've chatted about this. We haven't dug into extreme depth on it. So, I don't think he's yet thought through all the issues involved in actually making a decentralized infrastructure for AI or doing decentralized governance of AI. But I think he's started down that path, which is good. But that's Vitalik. Now the Ethereum code base and ecosystem as a whole is a different matter. I mean, I think there's pretty much no way to make Ethereum subject to efficient formal verification. Like, that's not the kind of language that Solidity is, right? And in general, the Ethereum code base is a very, very big, hairy mess, right? I mean, it's cool because it was sort of the first of its kind,
breakthrough,
right?
yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to take an analogy to operating systems, while it's open source, it's probably more like the code base behind Windows 3.1 or something. Then, I mean, Linux is very, very nicely and thoughtfully architected with different layers, and there's a kernel team doing that. And then there's daemons, and as a result, you can make embedded Linux, and you can have all these different forks of Linux. There's not that level of thoughtful architecture inside the Ethereum code base. They were moving fast and breaking things, right? And they got the market share for that reason, right? Because they were out there first. But the cost of getting out there in such a hasty way, and then doing such a wonderful job of pulling in a large, diverse development community, right? So the cost of making a messy, badly architected code base, and then throwing a decentralized community of developers in a massive hurry to make money as quickly as possible at it. I mean, it's a big mess of spaghetti code. I mean, and this is part of the reason why Charles Hoskinson went off to develop Cardano, right?
Yeah.
And Cardano is doing things right in terms of software architecture as well as algorithmics and governance, but historically they've been slower to roll things out, right? And so they haven't grabbed market share, right?
Yeah.
But in decentralized AI, I think the situation's a little different. Like, I don't think the competition is between different decentralized AI networks, really. I mean, there may be that competition at the sort of shallow level of which one gets a higher coin market cap rating or something, right? But in terms of actual impact on the world and the obtaining of utilization in the sphere of AI developers and users, really the competition is between the decentralized world and the mainstream AI world, which is big tech companies that are currently close to dominant, right? And I mean, the question is if any of the little decentralized AI networks can do something cool enough to drain away a significant percent of AI market share from the big tech companies, right? And I don't think that cleverly integrating DeFi with your your AI-based blockchain is going to do that. I mean, I see how that can increase market cap and make you money, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not in the scope of the crypto world. It's not a stupid thing to be doing. And I mean, DeFi has its own niche with its own value, and there's a lot of interesting things you can do with AI for DeFi in various senses. And in Singularity DAO, I mean, we're looking at some radical new things to do, which is the DeFi project in Singularity Net ecosystem, right? And then Cogito in that ecosystem as well, doing some interesting AI for DeFi things. That's all good. I mean, it helps bring in money to fund more and more AI development, and it gives ROI to token holders, right? On the other hand, if we want to compete with the big tech companies, we've got to be doing something different than that. Like just screwing around within the crypto ghetto is not going to do it. I mean, that's
crypto ghetto. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants utilization and utility for tokens in crypto.
Yeah.
But the joke is that DeFi is considered a token utility. But in reality, what is it? You're shuffling money around from token A to token B to token C, right? Now, I mean, of course, Wall Street is a similar sort of shell game, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a more crooked shell game dominated by big governments and big banks. So absolutely, you know, we want this sort of modern finance shell game in a decentralized way without weird gating and privileging to corrupt big banks and so forth. So you certainly want that, and it does prove token utility in a sense. I mean, it proves like the infrastructure is not so bad that you can't do anything and no one can log on. On the other hand, it doesn't really yet prove that crypto is useful for the world, right? Like it's really just shuffling crypto for crypto. So you need decentralized AI to roll out things that are actually useful for the world outside of crypto. And it has to do some of these things better than what big tech is doing. And then decentralized AI has a real purpose. And if it becomes 5 or 10% of global AI market share, that's amazing, right? You don't need to be 100%. Just like open source operating system, like Linux, okay, it's 70% of internet servers. It's a lot of mobile because of Android. It's in embedded devices. It doesn't dominate like the PC laptop market, right? You've got Microsoft and Apple there. You don't have to kill all the big companies. You need to do like Linux has and take a substantial chunk of market share.
Yeah.
And then the narrative is fundamentally shifted by what you're doing, right? And I think we have a trajectory toward this in Singularity Net in that by developing OpenCog Hyperon AI tools and running them on top of Singularity Net, Hypercycle, NuNet, and then using this to do some practical things like doing reasoning better than LLMs do so that we can help scientists discover things, doing music and art generation in a more creative way than what current neural generative models are doing. So you don't just get derivative recombinations of existing stuff, right? So if we can use our particular AI tools launched on our decentralized platform to do cooler things than big tech's AI models are doing, I mean, then you can get a bunch of users, and then that puts decentralized AI in a whole different position. Now, if some other decentralized AI network were to pull that off, that would be great for us too, right? Because if any decentralized AI network does something that gets a lot of ordinary users to come into the crypto world, not because they want to make money on crypto, but because that's where the best AI tools are, right? I mean, then you get a bunch of AI-oriented users who have crypto wallets, right? And who are kind of clued in, like, okay, crypto is a good way to deliver AI, right?
Yeah.
And so then once you're there, then we'll see a whole new flourishing in the crypto space, right? And this is what I hope will happen out of the current crypto bull market, right? So I think odds are fairly high we're entering a bullish phase for crypto. I mean, never know for sure, but the question will be if this is the bullish phase during which crypto applications actually useful in the world at large get rolled out at scale, right? Because if that happens, then I think the next bearish phase will be quite brief, and crypto will be
Kind of like the plateau, and then like
I think. I mean, of course, it's going to go up and down because the token whales manipulating the markets want it to go up and down, so they can drive it down, steal all the money from the naive retail investors, then buy at the bottom and pump it up again, right? Like that. We're not getting rid of that dynamic in the immediate term,
soon. Yeah.
Right. On the other hand, if we have decentralized blockchain-based projects that have a load of real users who are not just token speculators, but are just there because they want that product, right? If you've got a bunch of real users using tokens to get their services delivered, right? Then I think there's a limit to how long and how deep a bear market will get. I mean, it could also have the function of, slowing down the rate of appreciation. I mean, this is what happens when a company goes from startup phase to being mid-sized, right? I mean, yeah. There's less volatility, but you're also not going up quite as fast, right? So we might in this bull cycle we might be seeing crypto move into a sort of more mature phase. But
what's your prediction on the AI sector of this? Like, I know 2Feet told me a crazy valuation of we're in a $3.2 quadrillion market currently globally. And by I think he said 2028, it's supposed to approach almost double that at 3.6 quadrillion. Okay. I was like,
I'm not going to argue.
Holy smokes with this math, but
we may need a lot of inflation for that.
Yeah, I was like, that's a lot of money print. That's Jerome Powell just constantly turning that on full max. But even let's say like just a fraction of a fraction.
I mean the thing is, if the rate of AI progress is as fast as I think it will be, then AI essentially becomes the world economy, or say 30% of the world economy, however you want to figure it. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're still growing food and stuff, but the food may be, agriculture will be regulated by AI systems that are governing crop irrigation and so forth, right? So, I mean, if AI advances so fast that AI is a substantial portion of the global economy, I mean, then, so then say AI is half of global GDP, right? So in that case, if you have a platform that is the go-to platform for the world's AI, I mean, this becomes very big. You could look at that platform being 5% of global GDP or something, right? Wow. I mean that's setting aside the arithmetic. I mean that's sort of what Tufi's thinking. He's thinking if by 2028 most of the economy is running on AI, and if the majority of the AI is running on hypercycle, I mean perhaps on Singularity net nodes, running in hypercycle nodes, maybe using NuNet for deployment, but if it's running on Singularity net ecosystem stuff, right? I mean then yeah, that could certainly be tremendous, right? And I mean and that seems strange, but on the other hand, I mean, if you go back to the 80s or even the mid-90s, companies like Google or Facebook having the valuations they now have would have seemed pretty crazy, right? Like, I mean, in the early days of the internet, when we had search engines, like, was it Magellan, World Wide Worm, Metacrawler, like the various Yahoo search competitors in the late 90s, if you'd foreseen, okay, the best of these search engines is going to be multi-trillion-dollar company which will invent self-driving cars and so on, it would have seemed a very strange ambition for these web search and categorization services back then, right? So I think the world economy has revolutionized itself in that way. And I mean, going back further, in the 50s and 60s, we had only a few mainframe computers. while Gerald Feinberg was predicting that computers would soon be rolled out everywhere for participatory democracy on the world's population, no one was foreseeing like the economic aspect of people thought it was a joke that you'd have a computer in everybody's house. No one was foreseeing how big this industry would be.
Yeah.
Right? I remember, I forget if it was the CEO of Intel, Honeywell, IBM, but one of these big companies back in the 70s, they said, we think the total demand in the world for computers is about 5 or 10. It's like major military organizations, right? It's
Yeah.
like, why does the average person need a computer in their house? What do they have to compute, right? I mean, so that it's historically, common sense has been a poor guide to which companies and which tools are going to become dominant. And the visionaries like Tufi have existed at every stage and are identified in hindsight. So what's different, of course, is exponential acceleration, though, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
even these things like computing going from 5 computers to billions of computers, or web search going from a bunch of silly little tools to like a global business behemoth, right? I mean, these transitions each took decades. Now we're looking at a comparably bigger transition, potentially taking years, right?
Yeah.
But the funnier thing is, the next major transition after that could take months. Right?
And it's going to accelerate more and more.
This is what singularity means, right?
Yeah. Well, lots to think about, Ben. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks
it's been
a
an
lot.
absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for inviting us down to Panama.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. It's been a pleasure to be in a different location for one of these events. I mean, Dubai is beautiful and amazing, and we'll be back there soon. But I was ready for.
I haven't been there yet, so we'll be happy to come visit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I will say this has definitely been one of the most valuable we've been to. So definitely enjoyed ourselves, and every single conversation has been just information load.
Yeah, I think what we aim to do with this event is pull together people from AI field, from crypto realm, but also people who have been engaged in thinking about the future of AI and the future of technology for a long time from different perspectives. And now, like, the shit is getting real, right? So many of these folks, like myself, we've been churning on these ideas for decades. So now we're not just reacting to what we see, that there's a whole conceptual framework that's being brought to bear on understanding what's happening now and what's going to happen in the next few years. So yeah, hopefully the event has connected these various different sorts of people in a way that can help us guide things as we go forward. But yeah, your Discover Crypto's interest in the AI side has been much appreciated. So
Well, we enjoy it. Thanks again, Ben.
all right, thanks a lot.